It is the final football game before Thanksgiving, so of course it's a family affair. We've got the battle of the brothers, Jim Harbaugh and John Harbaugh, taking on each other at SoFi Stadium. Jim has done an amazing job in his first year as the head coach of the Chargers. So why is he a home dog to his brother? We'll break it all down for you on the pregame power-up, and it starts right now. Back-to-back primetime games for SoFi Stadium in LA. It's amazing what a couple of $1 billion will do for the atmosphere around there. Last night it was the Rams and the Eagles and Saquon running wild, and tonight it's the Chargers and Ravens duking it out in SoCal in a game that is critical for both of these teams. Hi everybody and welcome in to another edition of the pregame power-up presented by Campbell's Chunky. It is soup that eats like a meal. Trey Wingo here with Claudia Bellafotto. Marshall Newhouse will join us in a little bit. Mike Golick Jr. will stop by from SoFi to talk about the impact Jim Harbaugh has had on the Chargers. This really is kind of an elimination game in terms of divisions for both teams. The Ravens can't afford to fall to 7-5 and be that far behind the Steelers, having already lost to the Steelers. And the Chargers can't afford to fall another game behind the Chiefs, having already lost their home game to Kansas City. They'd be at 7-4. Well, Kansas City sits at 7-1, or 10-1 rather. 2.5 spread in favor of the visiting team. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me too much, just sort of the name brand and the Chargers being on this recent streak, but they started out a little shaky in terms of not finding an identity, really. When you have Justin Herbert, you're used to seeing him throw the ball. First 4 weeks, we didn't see him break 190, but that's not the case over the last few weeks. We'll dig into those numbers. So like you mentioned, yes, Ravens opened as a favorite, and we've seen it swing from 2.5 to 3, hasn't pushed 3. That's not surprising because 3 is the key number. The total is interesting, though. The look-ahead line, so the very early line was 47. When they reopened it to start this week of week 12, highest total at 51.5. Came down a bit to 51. More interestingly, though, the Chargers are the best under team, Ravens best over team in the NFL.
And we'll explain some other numbers why Lamar is really, really good on Monday nights. But let's start with the other quarterback and what Justin Herbert has done. The Chargers have won 4 games in a row. They've already won 2 more games than they had all of last season. A big part of that has been Justin Herbert, playing arguably the best football of his career. He has 13 touchdowns on the season and hasn't thrown an interception since week 2, his only one of the season. Last week against the Bengals in a shootout, he threw for 2 touchdowns, as they would say in English, and nearly 300 yards. But let's look at his numbers during this 4-game winning streak. They are impressive. Justin has 7 touchdowns, which was tied for the NFL lead entering this week, and he has a passer rating of 111.3. That's out of a possibility of 158.3. Don't ask me why it's that number. It don't make no sense. His 8 straight games without an interception, the longest streak in Chargers history. This year against Baltimore, quarterbacks are 9-2 to the over on their passing yard props. Herbert's tonight is set at 263.5. The quarterback talked about his recent performance and had to give credit to the big men up front, while his coach may have gotten a little carried away.
I think it's a combination of a few things, and I think it starts with the offensive line. And, you know, the play doesn't start without protection and having time to be able to get the ball off. And, you know, Bose and those guys have done such a great job communicating and working together. And, you know, I feel very comfortable dropping back and knowing that I've got time. And then having guys that go make plays downfield. You know, to be able to throw to Ladd, Q, Josh, you know, Jalen, they've all done such a great job. And, you know, I think it really is a team effort, and you know, they make my job really easy.
It is what it is. I mean, enjoy it. He's not only one of the best in the game currently. He's one of the best of all time. I do not think I'm going out on a what do they call it, on a ledge, on a limb. I do not feel at all like I'm going out on a limb and saying that.
You'd think a guy that was a former head coach at Stanford would know that trees have limbs.
They do.
Just want to throw that out there, Jimmy. I love you. Take the smelling salts. Something to watch in this one tonight. Herbert's favorite target is questionable heading into the game. That would be rookie wideout Ladd McConkey, dealing with a shoulder injury, leads the Chargers with 43 catches, 614 receiving yards, and a 23.8% target share this season. He had a career-high 123 receiving yards in their Week 11 win over the Bengals, despite banging that shoulder, and logged a couple of limited practices towards the end of the week. A couple of other notable injuries on the LA side. Starting linebacker Denzel Perryman will miss Monday night with a groin injury. Tight end Hayden Hurst placed on IR before the game. 6 other Chargers will carry that questionable tag into Monday, including Khalil Mack, who has the chance to play for the first time since Week 10. Baltimore could be without All-Pro linebacker Roquan Smith, who is questionable with a hamstring. Claudia.
Trey, what we love to do in the pregame power-up is break news. So breaking news, everybody. The 2 coaches playing each other tonight, they're brothers. I know.
The hell you say?
It's crazy.
I've never heard that before.
It's crazy. The last time we saw this matchup, it was when John's Ravens defeated Jim's 49ers in Super Bowl. You may remember 2013, 34-31 was the final in Super Bowl 47. Now, if you're looking to spin a betting angle on this, like we all do on the pregame power-up, the Harbaugh brothers on Monday Night Football, a combined 20-8 straight up, 19-9 against the spread as head coaches, which means they're both top 10 against the spread in profitability. Here's one more for you. John's team's especially good on the road, 16-5 against the spread on Monday Night Football. Here's how it looked in the 2 matchups between these two. As mentioned, John with the victory in the Super Bowl, but also the win in their 2011 regular season matchup. Almost exactly 13 years ago to the day, on Thanksgiving Day, no less. So John has the bragging rights, but what they both have done is downplay their own importance in this game all week. And instead, so cute, they had nothing but glowing things to say about one another.
Jim is a great. He's a fun guy. He's my brother. I've known him, since he was born, and I've got that on him, a couple months. But he loves football, man. He loves his players. He loves football. He's always got some way of seeing things, I think, that's really interesting, and that's why people are interested in hearing from him.
He's just a great example setter. He's a great son. He's a great husband. He's a great father, and great brother. And he's great at what he does. And one of the most, if not one of the most competitive people, the most, if not one of the most competitive people that I know, and learned so much from him, and admire him.
So for more on the Harbaugh Part 3, let's go back out to SoFi, where we find our LA South Bay correspondent. You, of course, know him as Mike Golick Jr. Mike, your football family is way up there in terms of traditions, and we've seen a lot of NFL players, family-wise, have a lot of success in this league, whether it's the Mannings, the Longs, the Fullers, the Matthews. But we've never really seen a pair of brothers dominate coaching the way Jim and John Harbaugh have at this level.
No, certainly not. To your point, we've seen even fathers and sons, obviously, in this. We're seeing Kyle Shanahan rise to prominence after coaching with that whole branch of the tree under his father, Mike. And even the Ryan brothers were both great coordinators. Rex ended up going on to become a head coach, but this has certainly taken it to the highest level that we've seen. And for now, Jim to have gone the sort of route that he did, going back to college, having all the success at Michigan, and then immediately finding his way back to this stage to have this kind of success, to make this a game worth covering again in primetime, is pretty remarkable.
And Chargers fans have to be happy. We'll get into the tail of the tape for the brothers and the 2 head coaches. But let's talk about what Jim has done with this Chargers squad to go from last in the division at 5-12, lose your leading rusher, your leading receiver, and then Justin Herbert to look like a shell of himself to start the season. Yet they come out 7-3 right now on a 4-game win streak. How much of that is Jim Harbaugh, and how did he do it, Mike?
Yeah, consistent communication and authenticity, I think, are at the foundation of what Jim Harbaugh has built. And you look around the NFL, that's really what it takes to be successful anywhere. It's why Dan Campbell was so successful in Detroit, because he came in, he was himself, and he was himself consistently over time. You think of someone like Mike Tomlin, who's had so much success for so long in Pittsburgh, all of the Mike Tomlinisms, it's fun for us in the media, but it's not an accident inside that building. It allows him to create a language they speak inside those walls, and then to go out and give players something consistent they can count on every day. And so Jim Harbaugh walking into this building, we hear the enthusiasm unknown to mankind and who's got it better than us and the high fives at the end of the game, but it creates an atmosphere where players understand the expectation for them each and every day in their specific roles on the team, and it's allowed them to go out and execute those roles at a high level.
Junior, that's such a great point because it is a communication business first and foremost. As my good friend Mark Schlereth says, it's a relational business. If you can't build a relationship with your players, you have no shot. But that also has to translate into statistical success. And I just want to get your take on this here. In the last 20 seasons, this is the best points allowed by a head coach in his first year with a team. That would be the 2011 Niners gave up 14.3 under Jim Harbaugh, and the 2024 Chargers 14.5 points per game under Jim Harbaugh. This is clearly not a coincidence. What is he doing distinctly and specifically with this defense that has made the turnaround?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with hiring the right people, and there's a reason offensively. You know, we'll talk about Greg Roman is someone that Jim Harbaugh immediately tapped, but he had Jesse Minter with him at Michigan and all the success that they had at the college level. Jesse, obviously a guy that cut his teeth and got his start under his brother John in Baltimore with this Ravens defense that we've seen now spreading across the NFL in terms of popularity. And so being able to come in and work with people you trust, you mentioned in the communication business, goes a long way in that. And then knowing the quality of the person doing that. Yeah, relationship's great, but Jesse Minter's a guy that was an incredible high-level college coach on the defensive side and coming over into the NFL with a system that is very popular right now, I think was able to come in and do a lot of the same teaching on that side of the ball that made Mike McDonald really successful last year with this Baltimore Ravens squad and now has made him really successful in year one in Seattle. So very similar DNA amongst all these groups, but that familiarity breeding comfort early on here.
And that defensive success has opened up the offense now. Like I said, Justin Herbert didn't break 180 passing yards through the first 4 weeks. They were a top 5 team when it came to rush rate, but now we're seeing them throw the ball. Justin Herbert looks much like himself. How much more of that is it Harbaugh's trust, or is it just this offense evolving with him?
You know what? We'll go all of the above. I think some of it is, hey, Justin was banged up early in the season. Remember that ankle injury bothering him some. Even coming out of training camp, there were worries about injury. And so finally maybe looking the healthiest he's been in a while. That mobility and physicality that we know Jim Harbaugh's enamored with is such a hallmark of Justin's game. And I think the offensive line being healthy, Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater both dealt with some injury early on, and just comfort with this new receiving group. There weren't a lot of time under task with Justin here. So Quentin Johnston, a guy in a second year looking more like himself. Ladd McConkey, when he's been healthy and available, has been an incredible route runner and a guy that's able to get open and give Justin Herbert a reliable target. We know the ground game was going to be the foundation. And now for Greg Roman down the home stretch of the season, I think for him, the question is going to be, are we going to continue to evolve this passing attack? We saw a little glimpse of this in the Sunday night game against the Bengals last week, where the second half, things started to get a little bit stale. It started to get a little bit vanilla, and it allowed the Bengals to get back in that football game. Can he maintain the same creativity as a run play caller and a pass play caller down the home stretch of the season is going to determine a lot of what this Chargers ceiling looks like, especially with the postseason for really on the menu.
Well, all that being said, this game, Junior, really is a litmus test for the Chargers, right? They've beaten up on bad teams and really have had a little bit of success against teams with a winning record. That one win against the Denver Broncos early in the season. So where do we see the Chargers heading into this game tonight as a legitimate contender in the AFC?
Yeah, well, I think it's, first off, in the AFC is the important part of this. We're talking about a sub-500 Miami Dolphins team right now that still has a shot in the AFC wildcard picture. So it's certainly opened up for everyone involved. But I do think, again, just the foundation they've set on the lines of scrimmage is going to give you a chance. I think, like usual with the Chargers, health is ultimately going to determine a lot. We saw last week when you've got guys banged up in the secondary like Cam Hart late in that game, the way it changes what they can do. I don't know how much depth there is on this Chargers squad, but I do believe top end, because you've got one of the space alien quarterbacks in Justin Herbert, and you've got a defense that, yes, has feasted on a lot of lesser competition, but has incredibly talented parts, albeit older ones that we know have dealt with injury a little bit. I still think because of that confidence that they now have gotten over the first run of the season here, you've got good habits, you've got good bones to this, and a great foundation for a postseason run.
To our space alien correspondent, Mike Golick Jr. out there in LA, we appreciate you. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks,
if you hadn't said it, Claudia, If you hadn't said it, I was going to say it. Coming up, Lamar may have had a tough outing in Week 11 against Pittsburgh, but there couldn't be a better spot for the MVP candidate to bounce back in a big way. We'll explain as we continue on the Pregame PowerUp. Pregame PowerUp is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal.
Lamar Jackson had his worst game of the season, and the Ravens lost to the Steelers last week in Pittsburgh. Jackson had a season-low 66.1 passer rating, and the Ravens only managed to score a season-low 16 points. It broke a streak of 4 straight games with multiple passing touchdowns for Lamar. He has dropped to second in the MVP odds at plus 275 behind Josh Allen. Tonight's first and trend is going to be about him bouncing back, because the trends bode well to that happening tonight. In his career, he is 6-1 against the spread after a loss over the last 2 seasons, which may be a big reason why they're a favorite tonight on the road. He's 6-2 on Monday night, not afraid of the dark. 19-5 overall at night, which is the best winning percentage of any quarterback with a minimum of 15 games. And how about this? 25-6 against the spread as a favorite of 3 points or less, which they are tonight. Here's what he had to say about his team bouncing back.
Just being consistent. When we're doing things out there on that field, we got to be consistent, and that's what we're chasing. And we're not doing a good job at being consistent. You know, we having our moments where going to the game, scoring first drive. And it's been a couple weeks we haven't been scoring first drive. You know, and it's just been taking us a little while to get our groove, and we got to work on that. That's the biggest thing for us right now, just being consistent. And like I said earlier, just putting points on the board, because that's our job.
Yep, that is their job. And despite the poor performance in Pittsburgh, Lamar still leads the league in multiple quarterback categories. He's got the top passer rating in the NFL. He leads all quarterbacks with 584 rush yards. And he's second in yards per attempt, second in touchdown to interception ratio, behind only his counterpart tonight, right?
Yeah, the other thing you don't want to do is play Lamar Jackson and the Ravens after a loss. In his career, the Ravens are 17-4 with Lamar Jackson under center after a loss, better only by Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs are 19-4. And on Monday night, she's thrown 20 touchdown passes and exactly 0 interceptions in his career.
Scared.
But who am I to share this information with you? We have much better people to do that. For more, let's go to someone who has more. Stormy Buonantony from the DraftKings trading floor in Las Vegas, VSiN betting analyst. So real simple, let's start with the most basic question of all in the Harbaugh. Which brother is getting the big bets going into this one, Stormy?
Listen, well, Trey, I'm sure that Jim Harbaugh will have this Chargers team ready to go with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind, but that's not stopping bettors from backing his brother John in this one. We are seeing a lot of public money and respected money come in on the Baltimore Ravens in this spot. 85% of the handle, 75% of the bets, all laying the number with the Baltimore Ravens. It's been bet up from 1.5 to now we're seeing that field goal at 3. And I think that there's just a number of factors in this, all of the ones that you guys just laid out about Lamar Jackson for one, but also when you look at this Chargers defense, for as good as they have been, maybe got exposed a little bit in the second half against that Bengals team. Who are the other offenses that they faced over the course of this winning streak? Teams like the Titans, the Browns, the Saints. One of these things is not like the other when you look at the power on this Baltimore Ravens offense with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Plus, who's got it better than John Harbaugh in this sibling rivalry as well? You guys said it off the top of the show that Jim has lost both of the matchups so far, including the Super Bowl bragging rights, which as a 49ers fan still physically pains me. I have nightmares about it.
Stormy, you talk about the Chargers defense maybe having some holes we haven't seen exposed yet. That hasn't been the case with Baltimore's pass defense. They're allowing the most passing yards a game, and I've been saying this since the beginning of the show. Justin Herbert over the last 6 weeks starting to look like that MVP conversation type Justin Herbert, 237 plus in all but one of the last 6 weeks. How are people betting his props tonight?
Yeah, people are betting accordingly. Justin Herbert's passing yards prop tonight, 261.5, 97% of the bets and handle all on that over, and he has gone over it in 4 of his last 5 games. Similar splits when it comes to his passing touchdowns. He's had 7 over the course of this 4-game win streak, so the over 1.5 getting a lot of play here. In terms of his wide receivers, it is a little bit more spread out because Ladd McConkey, his top wideout, questionable with a shoulder, which has scared bettors off of his props just a little bit. He's been bet down from 70.5 to 66.5, but given his ascension, if he is healthy out there, he's had the 4th most total receiving yards since week 7 of any wide receiver in the league. So somebody that I could have interest in if he ends up truly playing to his capabilities, especially considering for as rough as the Ravens pass defense has been in general, particularly bad against wide receiver ones, dead last in DVOA against opponents' top wide receivers. The rest of those yards getting spread out throughout guys like Quentin Johnson and their tight end Will Dissly as well.
You mentioned Derrick Henry. Until the recent blitz by Saquon Barkley and the yardage output that he's had, including that massive game on Sunday night, everyone was talking about how great Derrick Henry has been. Now he goes up against the #1 rushing defense tonight, and he's done this a couple of times in his career, albeit as a member of the Tennessee Titans, facing the #1 scoring defense as well. In those 2 games when he was facing the #1 scoring defense, he has been 2-0, his Titans were, with about 140 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown in both of those games. What are the expectations for Derrick Henry tonight against the #1 scoring defense?
Are you telling me to take all the alternate props? Because I'll go there if you need me to.
I'm telling you to do what you feel, Stormy.
Derrick Henry, his number actually, given the output that he's had each of the last couple of games, has led bettors to lean more toward his under, but it is still a high number in this game, 84.5, but bet down from 87.5 yards. But listen, the way that people have been not afraid to bet Derrick Henry, regardless of circumstance, has been him getting in the end zone. Even though his anytime touchdown prop opened for this game at -180, people are still all in on it, bet it up to -220. So if you want to win $100, you have to bet $220 on Derrick Henry to get in the end zone. That's how profitable he's been. He scored in all 11 games this season, 15 total on the year. But a fun little note, of those 11 games that he has scored in, 6 he scored the first touchdown of the game, and you're getting +350 on him to score a first touchdown tonight versus the -220 if you're looking for a little bit of fun. But even though he has had all the success in the world against top scoring defenses in the league in his past, as you mentioned with Tennessee, people are still betting his under tonight, oddly enough.
All right, we'll see how it plays out. Stormy, as always, we appreciate the information, and we will see what happens on the field when they get going between the Ravens and the Chargers. You mentioned those props. Let's take a look at some other player props. Justin Herbert on there for both his passing and rushing yard totals. All people also like Cameron Dicker to split the uprights, but the top prop is the former TCU wide receiver Quentin Johnston, longest reception, and there is a good reason for that. Let's do a deep dive into the matchups tonight, courtesy of NextGen Stats. Johnson has recorded 6 touchdowns on only 19 downfield targets. That's the second most downfield touchdowns in the league, and Justin Herbert loves to air it out. He's got 588 passing yards off the deep ball this season. That is the second most in the NFL, and that could be what we like to say a problem for the Ravens, because we've mentioned their biggest weakness is their pass defense, but particularly the deep ball. The Ravens defense has the second most yards and most touchdowns on deep passes this season. They allowed a league-high 78 receptions on downfield passes coming in, and they've allowed the second highest rate of explosive plays. So to sum it up, expect Quentin Johnston to get some downfield looks tonight. And if you're facing this Ravens defense, why drive when you can fly? Is basically the philosophy. Because the Ravens defense against the run is extremely stingy, but we just showed you the numbers that create problems for them in the air.
Especially when the passing game's going so well right now.
Exactly. And let's bring in somebody else who might have a favorable thing or two to say about former TCU wide receiver Quentin Johnston. That would be, of course, former TCU player, longtime NFL player in the NFL, our big man in residence, Marshall Newhouse. Marshall, we'll get to maybe Quentin a little bit later, but let's start with culture change, because that is sort of the MO of Jim Harbaugh, whether it was at San Diego State, at Stanford, at San Francisco, at Michigan, and now he's making that same culture change for the Chargers. How does a coach change his identity that quickly, or the team's identity, and what are the tools that makes Harbaugh so successful at it?
Well, I think you just have to listen to things that he says. And he wants guys who like football. And then we kiki and laugh about how simple and cheeky that might be. But in reality, this is a job. We understand there's a transaction of my skills and talents for money. And so at the bare level, you want guys to show up. But if you get the buy-in from everyone, from the guy, athletic trainer who tapes your ankles, to the strength coach, to all the players, that only gives everyone in the building that much more success. So he wears the cleats, he wears the khakis, he adjusts the QB's shoulder pads before the game, but he cares and the players care in return. And oh, by the way, it helps when you have a Justin Herbert there already.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Who we love so much. It's awesome to see that connection. He's so excited to have this guy as his quarterback. I want to talk about this Ravens squad, who we mentioned at the top, surprising to some people maybe, being the 3-point favorite on the road, considering they've lost 2 of the last 4 games, sort of losing their identity a bit in some spots, specifically last week against Pittsburgh. How do you think that the Chargers can take advantage of the tape they have on the Ravens in those 2 losses?
Well, yeah, the Steelers have a weird hold on this version of the Ravens that I don't think anyone else in the league has over another team in their division. But they still did things that I think worked, but are fixable by Baltimore. But if you're the Chargers, you hope that your pass rushers are disciplined. They keep Lamar kind of in line in the pocket, and you hope that he doesn't take easy throws, because last week it felt very much like he was trying to force things. It felt like he was locked on his first receiver or the guy who he thought was the deep shot, instead of taking what were some very easy underneath passes that might have gone for 5 or 6 yards, but would put you in a favorable down distance the next down for the next play. And you do that over a course of a game, and you hold Baltimore to the points that you did. That's definitely a recipe for success. I just don't see Baltimore not adjusting, and Lamar specifically not adjusting.
All right, well, let's talk about an adjustment that Baltimore's had to deal with. Their defense was unbelievable last year across the board. They could stop the run, they could stop the pass, and they could get to the quarterback. They can't do 2 of those things this year. We've already talked about their issues in the passing game, and a large part of that passing game is because they can't generate pressure, Marshall. They have the 11th lowest rate in the league at 31.9%. But they were top 5 in sacks per game ending this week. What are you seeing there, and how do you explain the discrepancy?
Yeah, I mean, the pressure rate, especially when you're only rushing 4, directly correlates to how you can cover on the back end. So if you're not getting the quarterback to hurry up his procedure, if you're not getting pressure and feet and hands around the quarterback, they're sitting back there with all the time in the world to throw. And so I think guys like Odafe Owe on the edge, need to step up for sure. He's had some very bright, shining moments and times, but he needs to be more consistent. But it doesn't get any easier this week. You've got Rashawn Slater, left tackle, Joe Alt at right tackle. I'm looking for pressure and chaos to be in the middle. They've got Nnamdi Madubuike up the middle against what could be Zion Johnson, who's kind of getting tossed around at guard for the Chargers. I think that's their best shot because, as we've seen in the past, I got to play with Tom Brady. Quarterbacks who are taller in stature, traditional pocket passers, struggle when they get that pressure right in their lap. So Baltimore, I think, has to dial it up the middle and get pressure on those guards to really throw Justin Herbert off.
And do what they can possibly without Roquan Smith. Adam Schefter just tweeted he's unlikely to play. He was out there about 15 minutes ago on the field, but he is their leading tackler, as we know, all-pro linebacker. So not having him on the field, this is the first time he's been out with an injury since joining the squad. How much is that going to affect this defense?
Well, it's huge, even for an experienced team like this, experienced defense like this, because what people don't realize, I think, right off the bat, is Roquan Smith has the green dot. He talks, or it's spoken to directly by defensive coordinator Zach Orr. And so now I think that those green dot responsibilities are going to Kyle Hamilton, who's a safety. So Kyle Hamilton has a little bit more on his plate. He's got to then relay the play call to the rest of the defense, get everyone lined up. And then he himself, who's been an incredible player, then has to track Justin Herbert, make sure he doesn't scramble, blitz when he needs to blitz, and then cover the shorter routes and just be everywhere like Kyle Hamilton does. But that's one more thing on his play that Roquan Smith normally takes care of on top of being a pretty sure tackler.
That's really a great point because that does create a whole issue of communication that needs to be worked out throughout the team. And I'm sure they worked on it, but you're right. It's another step in the process and one more thing for Kyle Hamilton to have to deal with. All that being said, we know that John has won the two previous meetings in the NFL, both when Jim was the head coach at San Francisco. Do we see Jim breaking through here? Do we see a three-peat for John, in your opinion, tonight?
I still have the Ravens. Their record in response to losses and then also on Monday Night Football, to me, spells a victory. I think Lamar bounces back. I think they're adjusting. They're a team that has aspirations of going deep in the playoffs and getting back to where they were last year. So I think the Ravens know this is a moment they have to take care of business. I'll take the Ravens tonight.
All right, Marshall, thanks. We'll check back with you a little bit later on this edition of the Pregame PowerUp.
Thank you.
As you all know by now, we're the most pro offensive lineman show you're ever
That is a fact. I will die on that hill.
100%. Up next, we're heading back out to LA, where we find Gojo pushing his pro lineman agenda by getting people to kneel at the altar of alt. It'll all make sense. Trust us when we come back.
Pregame PowerUp is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal.
people, are giving you accolades and compliments and telling you you've arrived, that kick them in the shins. You kick them right in the shins. That's what you do. And those accolades could come from, could come from people you don't know, could come from the media, could come from your teammates, could come from friends, could come from your own family. They're trying to make you soft. Kick them in the shins.
And that's why Jim Harbaugh doesn't have a lot of friends outside his family. I mean, I get the point he's making, but assault? I don't know. That's the best way to go, Jimmy. Even though he has the Chargers at 7 wins and a playoff spot turning around a team that went 5-12 last year, he doesn't want to hear your praise. It's been an impressive first year in L.A., one that has Jim firmly on the Coach of the Year conversation, currently 4th best odds on the DK Sportsbook at plus 450 behind Dan Campbell and Kevin O'Connell. The 2023 Chargers had a minus 52-point differential. This season, they are plus 175. So we don't want to kick Captain Book in the shins, but his impersonations the last 2 weeks have been dreadful. So as he explains the liability for tonight, we'll try and figure out what the hell he's actually trying to impersonate.
Harbaugh Family Feud, round 3. Hey, you wearing a wire? See, we got some beauties been chirping about them little black birds. Big Stone Sal and Cash Money Mikey been blowing up the captain about getting down on Baltimore. All week long, Ravens, lay the wood, drink the juice. Don't even get me started on the total. I mean, come on. 47, 48, we go. Hey, 51, you still want a piece? One Ring Richie been yapping that the biggest hardball win on Monday is going down in Florida, where Jack and Jackie are celebrating 63 years of sticking it out. So when wise guys found out Johnny told the old man to kick it back east instead of having him and his mother come out to Inglewood, they was like, boom, give me the bolts. Jimmy's about to smack his big brother out a little bit, you know what I mean? Oh, and all you wackaloons betting the over? You think you're gonna see some points tonight? Forget about it.
All right, so I guess he was doing The Wire, one of the greatest shows in the history of television, HBO's show The Wire, about the drug scene in Baltimore, Stringer Bell, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Although he was going like Italian gangster, and if you know anything about The Wire, it's not Italian gangsters that are running the show there.
I was going to say, I know Italian gangsters. I don't know The Wire, so I can't say anything about that, but it was interesting.
You need to watch The Wire.
We love the effort, Captain.
Yeah,
Bud.
you need to watch The Wire.
Okay.
Really good show.
I'll add it to the list. Okay, let's head back out to LA and check in with Mike Golick Jr., who's got his own opinion on the biggest reason for the Chargers' success this season. And to nobody's surprise, it starts in the trenches.
On draft night, the Los Angeles Chargers sat patiently waiting with the 5th overall pick. Their offense was lacking weapons after shipping Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler out of town, and they could have gone that route with the 5th pick, taking a great wide receiver like Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors to try and help their all-world quarterback. Instead, they drafted this man, offensive tackle Joe Alt from the University of Notre Dame. Now, on draft night, when asked about going out and addressing the lack of weapons in the offense, head coach Jim Harbaugh had this to say about the pick.
Offensive linemen we look at as weapons. That group, when we talk about attacking and we talk about attacking on offense, offensive line is the tip of the spear.
And he was absolutely right. Joe Alt is a weapon, and I'm out here in Los Angeles to spread the good word and make sure the people of this fine town understand large excellence when they see it. Let's go to work.
Blue and yellow, powder blue and yellow, here we come, baby.
All right. What do you think of when you hear the phrase large excellence?
What phrase?
Large excellence.
For you.
There you go.
Say less.
How do you feel when you see this?
I love it.
What do you love about it?
Indian, Irish?
He is, Notre Dame guy.
Yes, sir, that's why.
Okay, there we
Definitely.
go. What do you know about Joe Alt?
He's the man. He's the legend.
#1 pick, would have changed it for the world.
Should he be in contention for Offensive Rookie of the Year?
Hell yeah! Is that a question? Is that a statement?
So you agree with Jim Harbaugh when he said offensive linemen are weapons?
Of course.
Wins and losses will come from where? The trenches.
Getting Joe Alt a generational tackle with Rashawn Slater
now Herbert's set for his entire career. Give the quarterback the extra couple of seconds, he'll do miracles. You see what he's doing with Rashawn Slater on the other side? Come on, man. What kind of question is that?
What if I told you that Joe Alt has allowed the second lowest pressure rate among the 7 rookie right tackles to record at least 50 pass block reps this season?
I'd say hell yeah.
If you could just tell people we're trying to make sure that his Offensive Rookie of the Year campaign gets up and running.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Can we get you to spread the good word about Joe Alt? We're trying to make sure that people know that offensive linemen can be Offensive Rookie of the Year too.
What they say, Joe Alt delete.
Will you take this card and spread the good word about Joe Alt and large excellence?
Yes, sir, and thank you for doing what you're doing, sir.
Large excellence, absolutely.
Don't forget about the linemen. They're people too.
Amen. Truer words never spoken. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I mean, I always thought linemen were people. I didn't think there was an option.
That man just said thank you for your service to Coach.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. All right, Justin Herbert isn't the only one who's benefited from the Chargers' offensive line. Former Raven J.K. Dobbins is healthy and has found a career resurgence in L.A., leading the team with 726 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns on the season. He's had 2 or more rushing touchdowns in 2 of his last 3 games after having only 2 other such games in his career. Only Jalen Hurts, the quarterback of the Eagles, with 7, and Joe Mixon, the running back for the Texans, with 6, have more rushing TDs than Dobbins since Week 8. Dobbins has already played 10 games this season, more than his last 3 seasons combined. He missed all of 2021 after tearing his ACL in the preseason. He missed 6 games in 2022 with another knee surgery. And last season, he tore his Achilles in Week 1 after just 8 carries. Now he's about 80 yards and a touchdown from tying his career highs through 10 games this season. And really, much in the same way a lot of people have celebrated Nick Chubb's return after yet another torn ACL in his career. Dobbins has been through a lot, so to see him go through all of those surgeries and injuries that we just talked about and see that production still there is really remarkable.
Yeah, and he's been really emotional when talking about it too, and I think he's almost in the perfect place with the perfect coach and the pieces around him to have the year that he's having. So certainly happy for them. Let's talk about one running back that nobody can deny the outrageous talent that he has. That would be Saquon Barkley. Last night on Sunday Night Football, he ran himself, literally, right into the mix of the MVP conversation. Barkley went for a career-high 255 yards on the ground, which included a touchdown run of 70 and 72 yards in the Eagles' 37-20 win over the Rams. He leads the NFL with 1,392 rush yards through 11 games, putting him on pace for 2,151, which would eclipse the Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing record of 2,105. Here's how his performance shook up the MVP race. Barkley went from plus 4,000, if anybody has that ticket, reveal yourself, to now 5-1, and is now third in the odds behind Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Of course, 2012 was the last time a running back won the award. That was Adrian Peterson, who went for 2,000 yards for the Vikings. Where he is a heavy favorite, though, Saquon Barkley, to win Offensive Player of the Year at minus 310.
Yeah, and that year in 2012, Adrian Peterson came back from a torn ACL on Christmas Eve the previous season to put that number together and came up 9 yards short of Eric Dickerson's number. Look, it feels like we pick on the New York football teams all the time, but I just want to point this out. You mentioned 1,392 rushing yards for Saquon, 10 rushing touchdowns. The entire Giants team, 1,276 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns. Now, to be fair, you have to have a good offensive line, and there's a much better offensive line in Philadelphia than there was in New York.
No.
And speaking of offensive linemen, let's go back to our big man, Marshall Newhouse. You had to love this from Saquon when he tweeted after the game, how about those boys up front? When you see what they're doing and you see how Saquon responds to it, it just sort of puts in this unbelievable sort of bond between that running back and those big guys, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I have FOMO right now. I've jealousy that I didn't get to play with the back of this caliber until maybe my 8th or 9th year. I got to play with Marshawn Lynch for a little bit in Oakland, but then Oakland Raiders. And it's just nothing better than as an offensive lineman knowing that you have a guy behind you who's going to make you right, because the job is hard enough as an offensive lineman up front. There's no thanks. We understand what we sign up for. But knowing there's times when your block doesn't have to be perfect, but you have a guy who can hit a home run like Saquon's hitting home runs. And so ultimately, I don't think he's going to be able to win the MVP because the NFL has not proven to me that they don't think this is a quarterback award. But his odds are as good as any running back. I still don't think we should forget about Derrick Henry. And then also you got to think about every time they run a tush push for a touchdown, every time they throw a touchdown to A.J. Brown, they're stealing touchdowns from Saquon that build his case for an MVP. So as good as the season as he's having, it's just not a real conversation.
Exactly. It goes back to the same conversation we have with Lamar Jackson. When you have one of the best backs out of the backfield, it just sort of takes away, in a sense, votes for MVP. Let's talk about this Giants squad. You can say it's the O-line. You can say it's the quarterback. You can say it's the receivers. They have a lot of problems. It's pretty much everything. They just had one of their most embarrassing losses to the Bucs. Of course, DeVito under center. Malik Neighbors was not happy about his involvement in the game. Take a listen.
What words today would you use to describe this loss?
Selfish. I'm tired of going out there and losing. I mean, obviously, it ain't the quarterback. Same outcome when we had DJ at quarterback. I mean, take a look. Take a look. It ain't the quarterback. Start getting the ball when it's 30-0. What you want me to do?
Why in the first half are they not looking at you?
I don't know. Talk to Dave about that. Talk to Dave.
And if only they had a player like Saquon Barkley or something out of the backfield to help out that offense. It's one thing to fix scheme, but how do you fix the locker room at this point, Marshall?
Well, first of all, I got to applaud Malik Neighbors for that gun control. I think he needs a sponsorship from Juicy Fruit, or do they make zebra stripes still? I don't know, something. The gun
double
was
bubble.
Great, but double bubble, yeah. But yeah, I think there's just a disconnect all across the organization right now, and I really like the Maras as the ownership group. I think they handle business in the right way, but ultimately the decisions they've made at head coach for the last, we call it 8-9 years, have been pretty poor, and that only trickles down. I think the only saving grace for Brian Daboll and Joe Sheehan is this draft class, including Malik Neighbors, is one of the best in the league. It's performing at a really, really high clip. But yeah, you let Saquon walk. You also agree to let that be recorded and just the intimacy of behind the scenes be displayed. None of it looks good. And then you have what he's amounting to. He's kind of following in the diva wide receiver footsteps pretty well. Malik Neighbors saying that it's not the quarterback. It was the quarterback. It was both Daniel Jones and it's Tommy DeVito, whoever they want to throw out there. But it's also who picks the quarterback, who pays the quarterback. And so it's kind of a systemic thing right now. I don't believe either the GM or the head coach have job security. I think they've got to shake one or the other or both up. But then they've got to look at their track record. The Grim Reaper meme walking down the hallway of Axe Giants head coaches does not bode well for the organization. So they've got to figure something out soon.
They do, but ownership had to sign off on benching Daniel Jones. So it is kind of BS in my opinion. It's like, okay, we're telling you to do this, and then we're going to fire you for doing it because you're not winning enough. That's kind of crap, and you know that to be true. All right, so the Giants are an absolute mess. We know this. Two teams that we thought had high expectations, the Commanders and the Texans. The Texans blow a home game against Will Levis, who's playing better. But C.J. Stroud has clearly regressed, and it feels like that rookie wall is hitting Jaden Daniels right about now, which is when a college player realizes, holy crap, we got 5 more games to get to the postseason. Which team is more concerning to you right now, the Commanders or the Texans?
Well, the Texans are really concerning just because, as you mentioned, the regression of C.J. Stroud, the interior offensive line is not playing to their standard. And yeah, you can't lose to the Titans in the division, but ultimately they still have a lead in what is a poor division. So I think they have more time and more room, a margin of error to figure this out. The Commanders are chasing Philly, chasing this wild card, and they have taken a turn since Jaden Daniels got hurt. I do believe his rib injury is impacting him. We know about Cliff Kingsbury's second half of the season, how things kind of fall off for him statistically, but Jaden Daniels is not the quarterback that we were seeing the first 7 weeks of the season. So to me, that's a little bit more concerning.
Yeah, and real quickly expound on that, because if your ribs are hurt, you can't breathe without hurting. You can't laugh. It affects everything you do.
Yeah, definitely. And there's no rib cage, there's no protector that can keep you from having to not twist. It's a torque thing from either the mesh in the shotgun, running and throwing, and then as you mentioned, barking out the calls. And so all of it gets affected, and he just doesn't look the same. His accuracy is off a little bit. His ability to run, his dynamism when he runs is off a little bit. To me, that's the biggest explanation outside of just being a rookie wall. But he wasn't doing, it's decision-making too. He wasn't doing these things early in the season.
He wasn't. All right, Marshall, we'll see what happens with them, and we'll see what happens with the Texans trying to figure this thing out with C.J. Stroud. Lots more coming on this edition of the Pregame Power-Up. It's the viral meme that has taken over the internet, and we're going to address it in our own unique way by taking a look at some chill guys. in tonight's game. That's next on the pregame power. Marshall, very chill, by the way. Very chill.
Very chill guy.
Pregame Power Up is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal.
Welcome back to Pregame Power Up, presented by Campbell's Chunky. Soup that eats like a meal. There's a dog. This is supposed to be a cat segment.
What's going on?
NextGen Cats. He actually cashed last week. Nick Chubb, first touchdown.
Yeah.
Oh, you're getting
we're
all the
building up the
angles.
drama now. He's climbing the stairs to success.
Here we go. First touchdown score is...
Who is it?
Derrick Henry.
There you go.
Only
well,
plus
that's the one Stormy called. Stormy called that too.
She did. Only plus 392 goes to show you how much respect he's getting from the market. From the cats and the dogs of the world to the humans, the most bet anytime touchdown scorers tonight we will get to. But first, Derrick Henry has one or more touchdowns in each of his 11 games in the 2024 season. He is the fourth player in the Super Bowl era with a touchdown in each of his first 11 games. It's the longest streak to start a season since Hall of Famer Jerry Rice in 1987, 12 games. He has scored exactly one rushing touchdown in each of his 4 career games against the Chargers, and at 103 career rushing touchdowns, he needs just one more to tie Hall of Famer John Riggins for the 7th most all time. Now let's talk about those touchdown scorers.
Let's do it.
The reason he is a crazy price for a first touchdown is you have to lay minus 220 for an anytime.
That's not good.
J.K. Dobbins, a little bit more digestible at minus 130. Then we get to the plus money around 2-1 for Quentin Johnston. Lamar Jackson, who runs it but doesn't always run it into the end zone. And Zay Flowers there at plus 150, Trey.
All right, normally we end the show with a little thing we like to call the data dump because we can't get all this information into this nice, tight 60-minute show that we have. But we're ending the show today with something in honor of everyone's favorite virtual meme that's gone around. So just some chill guys. And we're talking about some players that have gone cold, including, at one point, the most accurate kicker in the history of the NFL, Justin Tucker. And I'll just put it out there. Travis Kelce and the Chiefs broke Justin Tucker. AFC Championship game last year in Baltimore. They kicked him out of his warm-up zone, and he hasn't been the same since. He missed 2 field goals in the first quarter of Baltimore's 2-point loss to Pittsburgh last week. It was the first time in Tucker's career missing multiple field goals in a single quarter of a game. Tucker's 72.7% made on field goal attempts, a career low for a season. Previous low was 82.5 way back in 2015. Everyone's making 50-plus yarders except Justin Tucker. He's 4 of 12 from 50-plus yards since the start of last season. Travis Kelce has broken Justin Tucker.
Poor chill guy. Lamar Jackson has been hot in the passing game, but he has really chilled out in the run game lately. When it comes to his rushing props, he's 3-8 to the under on his rushing yards this season, 3-7 to the under on rush attempts. His props tonight, attempts set at 7.5. He hasn't won over that. He hasn't gone over that in the last 3 weeks, Trey.
Well, then there's Josh Palmer. You know, we talked about Ladd McConkey. This music is just making me sad.
It's really sad.
I'm just so sad.
It's not chill, it's depressing.
We talked about Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnson being involved in the Chargers offense more of late. That means Josh Palmer has been put on ice a little bit. No more than 2 receptions in each of his last 4 games. He is 7-2 to the under on reception props this season, 7-2 rather. And tonight the total is set at 2.5. And then there's Deontay Johnson. The Ravens acquired Deontay Johnson at the trade deadline, and they really just left him chilling on the sidelines. A report from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN this week said Ravens offense coordinator Todd Monken basically acknowledged that they're having a tough time finding ways to involve Johnson in the offense, which is a nice way of saying he doesn't get what we're trying to do. And they basically just acquired him because he was too good of a player to pass up the price Carolina was asking. Johnson has caught exactly, wait for it, carry the one out the 5, 1 pass. It's being acquired by the Ravens a month ago. And there you have it, just some good, chill guys. One other thing tonight, we talked about Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
If he scores a rushing touchdown tonight, or a rushing touchdown,
Rushing,
call it in English, it would be the 104th of his career. Why is that significant? He would tie John Riggins for 7th all-time with 104 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, so that is on the line tonight. Again, too, and the book, Captain Book did mention this, but a big reason that you're also not getting points with the Ravens is the liability would be crazy because nobody wants to bet against Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson.
All right, a little programming note for you. Normally here on Mondays and Thursdays, but we've got 3 football games on Thursday because it's Thanksgiving. So a special edition of the pregame PowerUp comes your way Wednesday, 6 o'clock Eastern on the DraftKings Network. For Claudia Bellafotto, for Billy behind the camera, for Hoff, for Slates, for everybody involved, for Mike Golick Jr., and for the big man, Marshall Newhouse. I'm Trey Wingo. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the Har Bowl, and we'll see you Wednesday, 6 o'clock Eastern.